morning. Welcome to Bill J.U. Esquire. I know that's not right, but that's okay. It's Bill and Ted Day, and I'm Roth Cornet. I'm joined by Eric Goldman.
So, hello, everyone. Station. Greetings.
We are going to be reviewing Bill and Ted Face the Music, but first I want to let everybody know that the next trivia event and your chance to win dollar bills is happening right after this show. It is for Dragon Ball Z, but go join in. Chance to play. You could win up to $650. Trivia is always fun. Joe makes this a really fun event, so highly encourage you to go in and support and participate. These have been a great time so far, and they're just getting better. And we also would love your take on what you would like to do next and different trivia ideas. That said, on to Bill and Ted Face the Music, the long awaited sequel. Eric Goldman, first and foremost, tell me your sort of relationship. Like, are you a huge Bill and Ted person? Are you a huge Bill and Ted fan? And how long were you awaiting this sequel?
Since summer of '91. Yeah, I'm a really big Bill and Ted fan. I can't remember if I've ever mentioned on SJU, but I've mentioned recently on my Keanu Reeves Alex Winter interview, if you watched, I saw the original Bill and Ted as a kid at a test screening the summer before it opened. It opened in '89. I saw it summer '88. So I was like telling my friends on the playground there was this great movie that they hadn't heard of. So I've been into it forever, kind of as long as I remember. And once the second one came out, I was waiting for a third one. So the fact that it took 29 years, it's a little longer than we expected. But my fandom level on Bill and Ted is very high. This is one of many collectibles I have around.
Excellent. Well, good to know. I think it's good to have that perspective here as well. I mean, I like Bill and Ted. I will own that I'm not that level of fan. I think the thing about this movie, but I remember we started talking about it, even just in what we do. I think 2010, I remember as far back as that is like when Bill and Ted sequel updates were happening. I remember asking Keanu Reeves about it at a couple different junkets and events personally. So in that sense, I feel like I've been hearing about it and awaiting it now for at least a decade. Yeah. So Dean Pariso coming on board as director, he's also the director of Galaxy Quest. And, you know, look, I'll confess my bias. We made a Galaxy Quest documentary, but I really do think it is one of the greatest comedies of all time. And so that edition enthused me. So with all of that said, what is your broad takeaway? Were you happy as a fan? Were you pleased? Did it deliver?
I was very happy. I loved it. You know, we'll get to quibbles later. But my overall opinion is this was great. This was exactly sort of the soothing, happy movie that we needed right now, but also as a Bill and Ted fan that I wanted. You know, there are a couple things, I guess, like in the broad scheme of things, I wish they could have also included. But I think as far as bringing these characters back, which is risky in general, doing a sequel this long after is risky. It's also these characters, it's risky because they're so youthful by their nature. Would it feel weird? But I thought that was kind of the fun experiment. And I thought like it really did exactly what I wanted. And it made me feel really good. It's a very earnest movie. It's a very like, you know, sort of saccharine at times, but I think in a way that works for these characters. So I was extremely pleased with Bill.
I want to take a moment and get granular, oddly enough, before I get broad and say that I just have to call out Bridget Lundy Payne as Wilhelmina Billy Logan, Ted and Elizabeth's daughter, who, for me, almost entirely stole the show. Really did an excellent job of embodying what was so great about Keanu in that role.
Yeah.
And kind of without it feeling over the top, oddly enough, because it's an over the top movie. It's supposed to be. It's definitely a very broad comedy, but with it still feeling somehow grounded and sincere, which I thought was an incredible thing to dance along. The supporting character that I would also call out is the addition of Anthony Kerrigan, who some of you guys might know from Barry, who feels every scene on that show as well, as Dennis Caleb McCoy. Oh my goodness.
So good.
These two additions, I think, were my favorite additions in the film. I also really liked Kristen Schaal. I thought she was funny, but those two for me embodied what was so great about Bill and Ted. energetically the first film, and yet somehow updated it. I will say that I one of my 7 wives is Samara Weaving, of course.
Yes.
But I'm not sure that she quite had that as much dialed in, you know?
I dug her in it. She had this one line early on, for some reason it just stuck out to me, where she's like, "That is our primary activity," where someone says all you do.
That I think was awesome.
I think it's Ted's dad saying all you do is listen to music. But I do agree that I really dug Samara Weaving, but Bridget Lundy Payne was sort of doing something special as far as a little eerie in a great way of evoking Keanu Reeves, just the physicality of Keanu Reeves, especially young Keanu Reeves. If you rewatch Bill and Ted, with like the hanging arms and like, you know, just there was something about it that was really just completely embodied there. So yeah, that was really kind of cool and impressive to see.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I really liked Samara Weaving. That was my favorite line from her as well. And she didn't need to do the exact same thing. I just thought because, you know, Billy was doing such an incredible, Billy, I'm using her character name. Bridget was doing such an incredible job that, she just stole it for me, you know, between those two. But let's talk about the classic characters that are returned and the overall arc. You know, I think what's really tricky about this movie is almost baked into the lore of Bill and Ted, which is this idea that they have written the greatest song ever that essentially saves the world. Now, obviously, if you set that up in the first movie, it doesn't matter because we're never going to hear the song, right? And we make up whatever we want out of it. However, as sequels go on, there is an expectation from the audience that we are eventually going to hear the song. And now we've been imagining it. And for that, in that sense, that mirrors for me what often happens with very, very long, decades-long awaited sequels, which is that fans have done a lot of work in their own imaginations about what is going to happen. And so inevitably, whatever is delivered can't exactly match that. And I think there's a level of expectation that's unfair on the movie. This is a movie that's beloved in memory. It's beloved because it's over the top and very silly. And it's beloved because it has an element to it of being fundamentally kind. And in that sense, I really thought this was a most excellent sequel that kind of hit thematically on what people enjoyed about Bill and Ted. I do wonder, particularly for some critics, if they forget why they liked Bill and Ted. You know what I mean? And they're looking for something out of this film that it was never meant to deliver. I do think it's a little bit uneven. I think it does not care at all about the logic of paradox and time travel, which is fine. Right. You know? And I think that it's a movie in a landscape where I think it couldn't have known this, but we're so far removed from being interested in thinking about apocalyptic circumstances that it's incredibly refreshing to have them set in a place where people just typically have goodwill to each other, and that the power of song can bring us together and save us and unite us, right? Because like we couldn't need that message now, you know, we need that now more than ever for me.
Right. No, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, it happens to be opening at a time where that message will mean even more given the 2020 of it all. But I always think it would have still been like, hey, this is like a really inherently sweet series, but this movie specifically, what they are saying is really like a nice message. And again, if you are a cynical person, or if you're like, I don't want to be told something that we can't achieve easily in real life, I understand that. But if you can kind of accept the Bill and Tedness of it all, you know, I think there's something really great there. You're absolutely right, Roth. Like that's the problem with doing a sequel to almost 30 years is we've spent 30 years imagining what could happen, right? And yeah, I will say like, I think this is a better movie than Bogus Journey, but Bogus Journey was an impressive sequel in that it was pretty audacious because it was like a sequel to a time travel movie that was like, this time we're going to kill them and take them to heaven and hell. Like it did not repeat. And I remember I was so sure in the 90s, that's how long we've been thinking about it, being like, oh, well, the third one's probably going to be in space, right? Because there was a little tease in the closing credits, but also because I was trying to think, well, time travel was the first one, Afterlife the second, so they have to do something different this time, right? Well, they ultimately didn't, in that it's mostly a time travel story. I don't think it's giving anything away because it's in the trailers that there's a little bit of Afterlife as well. So I think that's like, yeah, like kid me is like, hey, where's my space movie that I was never promised? You know, but I spent 30 years thinking about. But what they did was still great because it's a time travel movie again, but for Bill and Ted very specifically, because it's about them going into the future and visiting all these different incarnations of themselves, it still feels fresh as far as what they are encountering, you know? While they're using their daughters to clearly do a parallel to the first movie and the second movie a little more as far as what's happening to them.
Yeah, you know, and I think the message of the movie, without giving too much away, is like it's really not about any two individuals being or one individual being the savior of everybody. It's about us all participating, right, in our own saving, which I actually think is very beautiful, and I think it was elegantly done in terms of the scripting and the direction. And again, like it's bombastic, it's over the top. When I say elegant, it's not subtle by any stretch of the imagination. It's not supposed to be subtle. These characters aren't subtle. The world isn't subtle. So I think that was really, really well done. And I think it's not about time travel. Going back to I love time travel as a premise, as you know, and so like I do kind of go, well, like that doesn't follow the logic of, but it doesn't matter because it's about. It's not a cynical look at Arrested Development, the way that I think we've done a lot over the last couple of years, and I think is fair to point out about that generation, but sort of being stuck in your childhood and stuck in the past and stuck in nostalgia, which is, of course, very meta, because that's exactly what this movie is. It's about harkening back to the past and something that's 30 years old, looking back with the eyes of an adult. But I think it's also about understanding as an adult, it's time for you to pass it on. To the generation below you. I think there's a wisdom in that, actually. And it's able to look at the idea not so much of being stuck in time, but having put expectations on yourself about your own life that were perhaps unfair, which I actually think is incredibly insightful about that generation, because this is the generation of there was an overcorrection, and the kids were told you can do anything. You know, or like there was crazy expectations about what your life was supposed to be, and our world hasn't met those expectations for most people. That sounds like I'm giving a lot of depth to Bill and Ted Face the Music. I do think all of that is in there because I think Dean Pariso is a adept enough director that he can have all of that in there and have it be like very big and very fun and very funny and very over the top and about heaven and hell and Mozart.
Yeah. Well, I think and also it's really worth noting that this is a rare trilogy, especially when spread out like it is, that had the same writers for all three, Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson. So there's something really cool there too, because they created these characters. Like, you know, the origins of Bill and Ted go to the early 80s when these two guys came up with these characters in like a comedy troupe together. So I think that there's something really poignant about, like you said, like it's Bill and Ted, it's goofy. It's not like a looking at the camera message movie, but at the same time, it's two guys who, the writers even, who began as young men and now are middle-aged men. And so they're putting that into the characters as well, about a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit about even Bill and Ted, who are going to remain eternally youthful. Like, they are still Bill and Ted, but at the same time, they can't be exactly the same. There has to be some, you know, some nuance. And again, I know that's a funny word to use for Bill and Ted, but there has to be some layers there of some self-reflection and some change along the way. And I thought that was handled really well within the confines of an insane Bill and Ted movie.
Yeah, totally. So I'm gonna pick a nit.
Mm-hmm.
And these may not be the nits that everybody has. I know that some people have certainly discussed it, and it's the casting of the princesses. So the princesses who are now Bill and Ted's wives are currently played by two very fine actresses, Jayma Mays as Princess Joanna Preston, Bill's wife, and Erin Hayes as Princess Elizabeth Logan, Ted's wife. Here's my thought on this, which is generally the princesses have been recast 3 times, right? All 3 movies have different sets of princesses. The good part of the princesses in this trilogy, and I think something that was frankly very ahead of its time, was that they didn't just give them new love interests every single time. They had to actually evolve and have relationships with these women, which at the time, particularly around 91 and like that was not done. That was like,
right.
Wow, you are really forward thinking here.
They could have so easily had that movie begin with like, too bad we broke up with the princesses, like one of those throwaway lines, right?
Yeah, and they didn't fall into that trap, which every other franchise film, almost every other franchise film at the time, absolutely did. So, and in this film, they have an adult relationship. Again, it's not cynical, but they have problems and they have to work on it in a very Bill and Ted way, anchored by one of my favorite actresses, Jillian Bell, as a therapist. But what I would draw out is I don't mind that it was recast. They were recast. We've already established that. I am glad to see them still present in the movie. But they were recast by actresses that were 10 to 15 years younger than them. And in the original film, one of the actresses that played the princess was older than Keanu Reeves.
Right.
So I just didn't understand, for a movie that I thought was so thoughtful in all these other ways and like up to date and like had updated in certain ways, fell into that particular trap, because it's like, I looked up the women that had played the previous princesses. They're still working, the original two, and they are very attractive. They just look their age. The same way Alex Winter looks his age. Keanu obviously is a mutant.
Yeah, it's a very Hollywood thing, right? Because on one hand, it's like, it seems like, hey, you know, the actresses playing the princesses in this movie are in their 40s. It's not like they cast them as like, you know, 30-year-olds, like that. It wouldn't make no sense. But at the same time, yeah, it would have been nice if they had just kept people that were the same age as Alex Winter, Keanu Reeves, or in that realm. It's funny that you brought up.
They're also Hollywood 40s, though, Eric.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, that's life in the show business. But it's funny you bring up princesses, because I was going to bring them up too for a different nit to pick, which was I thought they kind of lost the plot with them a little bit, because early on they have that great scene in marriage counseling, and there's some really funny stuff there with Bill and Ted and how they express their love and affection for them. But it seems like, oh, they're going on their own adventure too, but it's kept very arm's length. So I kind of felt like, oh, we're missing some piece here. And I'm sure at a certain screenwriting level, because they're trying to keep these movies short, like 90 minutes, they also have the daughters having a parallel story. So it probably felt like, oh, the princesses is one too many, so we're going to kind of talk about it more than show it. But there was a part of me that thought, a couple more scenes of just them would have been kind of fun to like show what's happening for them at the same time.
You know, I agree with you. And it's funny because I actually reviewed this movie an hour ago in a different place for Press Play on the radio. And I was like, well, the good part is that they didn't fridge them. But now that you mention it, they actually kind of did fridge them in a way. You saw them, but you didn't hear much from them throughout the film. Which, yeah, I agree with you on that. But you know what? Outside of that, and to your point, they had a lot to manage in this movie, and a lot of different characters to manage, and they did want to keep it nice and tight. Which God bless you, God bless you. Everything's too long. Almost everything's too long, but not this movie. It's not too long. It moves, it's quick, it's very fluffy, it's, you know, it's enjoyable. So that was my one little thing, and I did want to bubble it up, but it didn't like ruin the experience for me by any stretch of the imagination. Right.
Same here. Oh, and here's my my super fan gripe. It's a total it has nothing to do with the plot, but at one point they reference the events of the original film as being in 1989. But even though it came out in 1989, it's clearly set in 1988. They say it twice in the movie. So, continuity checkers. Check your stuff. It's one of those super like geeky things where the moment I'm watching the movie, I go, 89? That's wrong. It's 88.
Yeah, well, I had the moment about the princesses. The minute they showed up, I was like, that's not them. What's going on?
Right. I guess I think it was different only because I love both those actresses. So I was like really excited and I really like what they get to do. But yeah, I do. I wouldn't call it like a fridging, but it's just a little too much off screening. It just felt like, like I said, I'm not asking for like, they should have a third of the movie. I just felt like a couple more scenes would have been nice, just of showing what was going on with them.
I love them too, really, to underscore that. It wasn't about them or their performance at all. It was really just about like, that is such a frankly tired fallback.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's not like they cast 20-year-olds, but they, you know, they match Keanu and the agelessness, and they are in fact much younger than them, and which doesn't match in terms of continuity. They were around the same age. That was the whole idea. It was teenagers meeting modern at the time teenagers. Anyway, all of that aside, that I feel like we spent a lot of time on a thing that's a relatively small part of the overall experience, which is joyful, which is fun. which is kind, which is about us as human beings choosing to trust one another and empower each other to do our best, which I think is like just so lovely right now. And in the middle of that, there's like a really funny killer robot and death, and like the idea of reconciling band and a number of things that are just a pure joy to watch. I highly recommend if you need something uplifting this movie. There's actually a few different comedies coming out. There's Bill and Ted. We have The Private Life of David Copperfield. Private History of, and this movie that's a Scottish film that's wacky as I'll get out. That's another coming of age movie called Get Duped. There's a few options for you, and I think we all could use a laugh right now. If you want to look back at the 80s in a very different way, there's a movie coming out on HBO Max called the Class Action Park, about Action Park. Oh my God, Eric, you must know about Action Park.
I know about it, and it's funny because Bridget Lundy Payne was in the movie that was a little bit based on it, that Johnny Knoxville movie, but I have to see that documentary.
Yeah, it is bonkers, banana pants in every way. And Eric, I will share with you right here and now that as I watched the movie, I suddenly remembered going on a family vacation with some friends, like my friend's family, to a water park. And I sat there and I went, I think I went to Action Park.
You think you survived Action Park?
I think I survived Action Park. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I want to say what, sort of as we're doing a little closing on Bill and Ted, I just want to say, there's also, there's just good feelings around this movie. And some of it's outside the movie, and then it's what the movie itself has. Like, even knowing the backstory, like you mentioned, this movie's been in development for 10 years. And that was a true labor of love, because Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves and the two writers, Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson, for a decade were trying to get this movie made. Matheson and Solomon wrote the script on spec, didn't get paid for it because they didn't own the rights, and they were trying to convince the studio, make this, don't do a reboot. And then you watch the movie and you're like, you feel the love that all these people have for it. You feel like, Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves do not need to be in this movie in 2020. They're there because they want to be. And there's just something, that I think that sweetness, that good feeling kind of goes through it all. And then there's other highlights like Bridget Lundy Payne. They give such a great performance, and Anthony Kerrigan, and these big highlights. So that's my warm wishes. Whoops! As I knocked my laptop. I was so excited, guys.
Careful.
I was so excited about Bill and Ted. I threw my computer across it.
I 100% agree with you on all of that, including those two additions. But, I think that because I was so impressed with them, and I frankly have seen them in a number of things, and I'm always very impressed with them as actors, that I don't want to forget the fact that Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves do anchor this movie, and they are able to equally impressively embody the spirit of Bill and Ted without it feeling offensively immature,
right.
Immature, and I just can't underscore enough. And I know we've said it a number of times, but I think we all wish we could be that. I wish, not dumb, but kind. Mm-hmm. I mean, just inherently kind, which they are. And I think probably what you're talking about comes through from who they are as people, mm-hmm. from who Dean is as a person. I don't know this, but it feels that way on screen, that the people, to your point, who are making this are also quite kind.
All my interactions with Ed Solomon, I think the same thing. I haven't met Chris Matheson, but they just seem like a really good group of people.
Yeah. So that's something I think that's worth celebrating. And it's also like, you know what, take my blah, 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 this message, that message, as you will. It's fun. It's just fun to watch. And I think we could all use that right now.
They say dude a lot, and it's great.
Yeah, they say dude a lot, and it's great. Air guitar, it's all there.
Yeah.
And I will say I do think that those themes are in there, which impresses me, because on top of that is just a wild, bombastic, over-the-top comedy. Again, I don't think this is sort of like, and take this as you will, this isn't a perfect movie. What is? Well, I could name some, but Galaxy Quest. It's not a perfect movie, but we shouldn't expect that, This is I think, really excellent Bill and Ted movie for right now, this moment.
Agreed. And I'll throw in one weekend recommendation besides that, since you threw in a couple, just on the 80s nostalgia tip, just to mention that Cobra Kai is on Netflix as of this weekend, so a lot more people can easily watch Cobra Kai. So if you want another throwback to something we loved in the 80s done really well, you should check that out.
Absolutely. I have it on my list, Eric. I literally have it queued up. I was going to start buying it last week when I remember it was going to be on Netflix.
Good.
So I'm very, very excited. Thank you for joining me today. You guys watch Bill and Ted. There's a number of things to watch this weekend, as we've mentioned, but this one is certainly worth your time, I think, if you need a little uplifting, and certainly if you liked Bill and Ted in the first place. That's it. We're going to come back on Monday. I think.
We'll have content.
Not live.
Not live.
Not live. Okay. I'm glad I know what's happening, you guys. But I do think we actually have a couple other reviews that are coming up for you guys over the next couple of weeks. Certainly Mulan, and a couple of surprise reviews here and there. Some other big releases that are coming out. Please do go sign up. Support Joe Starr. Hashtag support Joe Starr, and go sign up for our trivia event today. They're really fun, and he does such a great job of hosting them. It's your chance to win money. And also, we do want to hear your recommendations for future trivia, so let us know, and we will be here every weekday with stuff that I will find out about when I see it, including stuff I'm in. I also don't know that exists.
Wow.
All right, that's it, Ryan. Okay.